Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, both are available and for sale. Reach out to me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for pricing questions. Today, a competition between two Geneva-made platinum perpetual calendar watches with blue dials. Patek Philippe versus FP Journe versus starts now. Okay, so the fun thing about this is that both these watches are late model, platinum, blue dial, automatic perpetual calendars from brands that come from the opposite ends of the Geneva watchmaking spectrum. We have an incredible grand old name and an upstart. So let's start with the better known of the two brands. Patek Philippe, of course, established as Patek et Chapek back in 1839 and evolving with Jean-Adrien Philippe later on to become Patek Philippe. But the watch in my hand was launched in 2021. It is the 5236P001 In-Line Perpetual Calendar, based on 20th century in-line calendar pocket watches like the 699, the 843, the 844, the 725. All of those featured inline perpetual calendars, but this is the first time Patek did it in a wristwatch format. The case is an iconic design. You'll recognize it from the historic 3448s and 3450 perpetual calendars. Patek doesn't do retro watches, it doesn't do vintage tributes or reeditions, but it will quote its own history and give you a little glimpse of the past in microcosm on its watches. Now, the watch is a fair size, 41.3 millimeters, and that's the diameter. In terms of thickness, it is 11.3, lug-to-lug 48.6 with a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, the watch wears like a larger 5235 because the 5236 is exactly that. I'd recommend it for a wrist my size or larger because those angular lugs do make it feel a little bit larger than the bare measurements would suggest, but you can see down the barrel that the lugs are not out over the edge of my wrist, so I'm going to say if your wrist is my size or larger, game on. Both these watches will fit underneath the cuff, although the Journe is ever so slightly thinner than the Patek Philippe. The Patek features a gloss medium blue multi-scale shaped alligator leather strap, and you can see it's got a folded edge. It's got a monotone stitch, and then on the bottom calf skin and pull tab spring bars so you can pop it off without any kind of a tool. We have a full folding clasp right here in platinum to match the watch. Patek keeps the faith, and of course a platinum Patek, so of course it has a diamond between the lugs. Now around back, you could see if we can fix the focus here. Around back, we've got the Patek Philippe 31260 movement. So the 31260 movement was launched in 2011 on the 5235 as an annual calendar. Changes here, obviously including the perpetual, but what's important is that the rotor went from 22 karat gold to platinum, and there's an extra 20% torque in the mainspring to drive the perpetual. It's a 34 millimeter diameter movement. It is not related to the 240 micro rotor. This is a next generation micro rotor. You could see that both in the size, which is much larger, but also in the architecture with this individual train bridge system with the train wheels running down to the escapement. You can see these finger bridges, a nod to Genevois pocket watch manufacture in antiquity. Now, it's also got a couple of things that make it very refined. Being a micro rotor, the winding system and the rotor in the same plane as everything else. So you have an unobstructed view of the case back, but you still have the convenience of an automatic. The architecture is very handsome. The shape relative to position, size, and proportioning of the bridges, it's not just the decoration, it's also the architecture, and here it's very good. 6 position adjusted, free sprung balance, 4 hertz beat rate. It does have stop seconds, and of course the perpetual calendar and the moon phase, but it has a Patek Philippe attestation of accuracy. It'll run no worse than -1 + 2 seconds per 24 hours, and then it's got a free sprung gyromax style balance for more precise adjustment, but also greater shock resistance, and that with the silicon anti-magnetic hairspring. So lots to love. We'll get a little bit closer here and try to correct the wandering focus of my camera, but one of the most appealing features of this watch is its gradient dial. As with the 5235, it runs from top to bottom, a sort of brushed pattern, and then it has a gradient fade from the center where it's light to the edge where it's darker. White gold hands and indices, they won't tarnish or oxidize. We have chemin de fer, or railroad tracks, for reading the minutes and the seconds, and the hands are actually faceted down their center for better contrast. We have 4 wheels in total, 2 sets of coplanar discs, and they're all in the same plane, and then they pivot on ball bearing centers. We have this American style calendar with the day, double digit date, and the month. And of course, this is an old style perpetual calendar with a bunch of pusher adjusters. It uses a program wheel and a grand lever, so there are times of the day when you don't want to risk setting using these pushers. So we have this little day-night indicator right here, so you know when it's night, when not to use these pusher adjusters to set the calendar. And then the leap year phase is sort of hidden right there. The watch has a 48-hour power reserve and a surprising amount of water resistance. Patek is now saying the 30-meter rating on this is a true 30 meters. If true, that would mean you could surface swim with it, but I'm going to advise that you wait until Patek explicitly advises swimming with their 30-meter snapback push-down crown dress complications. Of course, a perpetual calendar and a very easy-to-read expression of the calendar. Now, over on the Journe side, we have a watch, the Quantieme Perpetuel, that came out in 2013. And this version, with the dial that does not have the steel dial bezel, this dial variant came out in 2020. Of course, they also offered it in rose gold and platinum and 40 or 42 millimeters. This one is 40 millimeters. It is 11.1 millimeters thick from lug to lug 48.2 with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. And what we're going to do now is we're going to keep playing with that autofocus. Throwing it on my wrist. This actually feels like it could wear on a slightly smaller wrist than mine. Let's say maybe a 15 or 14 centimeter circumference. It doesn't feel or look as large across the wrist as the Patek. And then you could see in profile, they're both pretty thin. Both will fit under a cuff, no issue there. We have large rectangular symmetrical scales on top, a very high quality cut of the animal. Only a semi-gloss finish here with curved spring bars. You can see we've got a monotone blue stitch and then a folded edge. And then on the bottom, we have small round scale alligator, which is more expensive but lasts longer. So on that basis, a slight advantage to the Journe strap. But Journe only has a pin buckle, not a clasp like the Patek. Journe will sell you a clasp, but at extra cost. So a little bit of economics here, just to make sure everything's well understood. This costs, as of the recording of this video, $148,331, and pre-owned is going to be about $100,000 to $110,000. This costs $97,315, and pre-owned, I've seen them as low as $150,000, but in general the market's going to be $170,000 to $180,000 for platinum, blue dial, no dial bezel, 40 millimeters. So you get a sense of what the markets are like for these two watches. So let's start with advantages of the Patek, and then I'll call the one that I like best. Okay, so the biggest advantage of the Patek is that we have a rock star case. I think the aesthetics of this case being tied so strongly to Patek history, plus that awesome diamond between the lugs, which is a privilege only of Patek Philippe Platinum watches. This 3448 case looks awesome, and it's only shared in the modern era with the 5235, whereas every Journe dress watch pretty much except something like the Vagabondage would feature this exact same case design. So you have a much more bespoke and historically relevant case here. Also, the standard full clasp, big advantage. Also important, far superior magnetic resistance. Patek has its Spiromax silicone hairspring, which is not just anti-magnetic, but also breathes concentrically like an overcoil. So this is a far more anti-magnetic watch for use around high-powered home and office electronics and static magnets like you might find in a laptop. Also, a guaranteed timing accuracy. It's very rare for a brand to say the watch will be no less accurate than X, but in fact they go big at Patek, saying this watch will run to no worse than -1 + 2 seconds per 24 hours. Far superior movement architecture, finish, and visibility. Because of the micro rotor, I can see everything. The architecture is attractive. It is a bigger diameter, 34 millimeter movement versus the Journe's 33. So other than the fact that the Journe is a gold movement, this is just more attractive on every level. And I just don't think that's going to be particularly controversial. Again, don't look at the material, look at the architecture and the decoration, and the Patek comes out way ahead on that basis. Also, the Patek has something the Journe does not. The Patek has a moon phase and a seconds hand, and I like to have those two things. I would gladly trade the Journe's power reserve indicator for these, but that's going to be subjective. That's your call. But this does have hacking seconds, a seconds hand, and a moon phase. The Journe doesn't have any of those. extra solid case back. When you buy this watch, it comes with an extra platinum case back that is solid, so you don't feel like you're being shorted the precious metal with a $30 or 30 Swiss franc sapphire. You also get the solid case back. Now, by itself, this watch has a mass of 128 grams versus 112 for the Journe. I actually did measure. This would have an even bigger edge if that solid case back were in place. Warranty. You buy this new, you get a 5-year warranty. From Journe, the best case scenario is you get a 3-year warranty, 2 years plus a boutique and registration extension of 1 year. So you get 3 with the Journe, 5 with Patek. In theory, this is now a swimmable 30-meter watch. So if that's true, big advantage Patek, but I'm waiting for Journe and Patek to clarify what they respectively mean by 30. If Patek says a true 30 meters and that's a swimmable watch, and they say it's a swimmable watch, then potentially big advantage. Also, this is the one to buy used. If it's new for 148 grand and used it's 100 to 110, then this is the one to buy through the miracle of depreciation. Okay, the Journe. Let's talk about what we've got going on here. Well, you have choice. You have both the old and the new style dials, the dials in a couple of different colors. You have 2 different case metals and 2 different case sizes, so there are options. Also important, 120-hour power reserve chronometric, 160 hours absolute. The Patek, it's going to be between 38 and 48, so big advantage on power reserve right here. Also, quick and easy to set the calendar. On this watch, it's very simple. You pull out the crown, you quick set the day, you quick set the date, not an issue. There's a little hidden lever that sits underneath the lug at 1 o'clock that's used to set the month in the leap year phase. No tools necessary and no dimples on the case band. Also important, and this is very, very, very important, the solid gold movement and the sterling silver blue galvanized dial do add a lot of richness. So while the movement isn't holistically as beautiful as the Patek, this noble metal on the movement as well as the dial adds richness and opulence to the Journe. I also think that compared to a seconds hand and a moon phase, the power reserve indicator, could be your preference. It could not be your preference, but the power reserve indicator is probably more practical, and having one is an advantage on the Journe because you know how close your perpetual calendar is to stopping. You may want to wind it up every couple of days if you're not wearing it. So that's an advantage there. Also, potentially a better community for these online and off. I know that Journe collectors through the Journe Society, through many informal local clubs, through online communities, even at the bars that they set up at Journe dealers, just a very robust social scene with a lot of events, a social calendar, and people who are genuinely into the watches. They even had a Journe Society chronometer that was a unique watch for Journe collectors. So I think on a community basis, there are certainly some great Patek communities, but I think the Journe Society, the Journe communities that are not the Journe Society, online and off, I think they're just more passionate and tight-knit, and I think that's an advantage of these. Also, an auteur watchmaker, when you're looking at a Journe watch, he has very strong opinions on aesthetics, functionality, extraordinary ability, gifts from God, and he is a historic figure in the watch industry. And while he may not be everyone's cup of tea, his unique vision and his impact are not up for debate. With Patek Philippe, you get more of a collaborative effort. This is the undivided work of one genius. Also, the setting system, wow, how easy is this with the crown and the lever? Whereas with Patek, you've got to pull out a tool and you've got to use those pusher adjusters. And then there's a danger zone, a time during which you can break the calendar on the Patek by using the pusher adjusters. Whereas here, there is no danger zone. You can set the calendar 24 hours a day without hazard. Also, I would say this is the one to buy new with a retail price of $97,315 as you see it here. It then sells for $170 to $180 used. If you're on the list for this, don't opt out. Go for it. Buy it. You'll never lose a cent. So which one do I prefer? Well, I gotta say I love the power reserve and the ease of setting the Journe, but holistically for me it's the Patek. First of all, I love the case, I love the dial, I love the inline calendar, so on an aesthetic basis, I choose it. I also like the value that comes with the extra platinum case back and the security that comes with the standard full clasp. The movement to me is more beautiful. Aesthetically, the finishing, the architecture, and the openness that comes through the use of a micro rotor, outstanding. I do like the hacking function. I also like the anti anti-magnetic qualities is I frequently magnetize my watches because of the equipment that I work around at the office. So having the anti-magnetic qualities really works out well for me. And then there is the accuracy attestation, -1, +2, no worse per 24 hours. Journe talks about 5-position adjustment and making an automatic watch like the Quantieme run like a chronometer, but this runs far better than a chronometer, and Journe doesn't make any promises, whereas Patek does. So I really like that. And it costs less money. Buying this used through the miracle of depreciation, you're going to get a more accessible watch. And then I don't think it'll depreciate any more than it already has. Plus, if you buy this 2 years old, you're still getting the same warranty as if you bought the Journe new. So on a lot of different levels, from tech specs to aesthetics to the brand itself, to some of the fringe benefits of ownership, the Patek would be my choice. So you guys, let me know in the description below. Cost on object, cost no object. Which of these would you prefer to own? Journe or Patek Philippe?